Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Getting There, the podcast with me, Brogan. Now, today I have the most incredible guest all the way from America. It is Callie Blackwell. Callie is a plant medicine practitioner, an activist, and the author of The Boy in 7 Billion, a title born from a heartbreaking reality. Her son Deryn was diagnosed with an aggressive illness, and after 4 brutal years of invasive treatment, he lost the will to live. Choosing to stop eating, surrendering to what seemed to be the inevitable. But what happened next defied all logic and medical expectation. In an act of desperation, Callie turned to plant medicine. And what followed was nothing short of a miracle. Today, Deryn is not just alive, he is thriving. Callie's story isn't just about saving her son, it's about questioning a system that profits from our sickness and discovering the healing power that nature has given us, if only we were brave enough to listen. We dive deep into the failures of modern medicine, the stigma surrounding alternative treatments, and how Callie now dedicates her life to helping others live out their prognosis by empowering them to save themselves. This is one of the most jaw-dropping, hope-filled conversations I've had in a long while. Let's get into it. Hello, Callie, and welcome to Getting There, the podcast. How are you? I feel like this has been so long overdue. We've been like virtual friends for a year now. I've been so excited to speak to you. I know, doesn't it? How are you? Where in the world are you?
I'm really, really good. I'm in the Midwest in the US, and it's really hot here today. The sun is out and I'm sunburnt already.
Oh,
but it's
beautiful.
nice. Winter has just left us, so I'm really happy about that, because winters here we had 22 inches of snow. So yeah, winters here are wintry, but summers here are summery. So I'm really happy. So yeah.
Well, it's better than in the UK where we just get an all-round cloud of grey.
Hey, well, they're about to dim the sun. They're doing you a huge favour.
What? I cannot. I was speaking to my friend the other day and I was like, I cannot believe I'm even sharing a story that they're about to dim the sun. Like, what the fuck is going on? It's the end of the world. Why is no one talking about this? I recently did an episode on all things health on YouTube. And I'm going to share the list of reasons why it was shadow banned. And it was like I was lying about chemtrails. I shouldn't give health advice, that not to eat anything that was processed. The list, Callie, was endless. And it was all truthful things. It was only like a 15-minute.
It should be common sense.
Exactly.
It's common sense. But common sense ain't so common no more, obviously.
Where are the common sense crew at? And you can't say diddly squat. But that's why we're here, to speak to people like you who challenge the norm and have been outspoken and have got incredible journeys. I know you've got your book out. What is it called? The One in a Billion? There we go. The Boy in 7 billion. Wow. And when was that published?
So this was published in April 2017, I believe. Yes.
So let's get through it. Let's get straight to it. Your son was terminally ill with cancer. Do you want to walk us through it from the beginning?
Yeah, I will keep it in a bridge version, because obviously I do have a book, and I would love for anybody who wants to read the full story, because this whole book is about how I discovered the medical corruption and how I discovered just that your child is not yours, and the cut, burn and poison and all of that. So
but we'll come into that later in the episode. We will come into that.
Yes, we will.
It's on my list.
Yeah. So back in 2010, when my son was about 10 and a half, he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is not very rare. There's about 300 children a year diagnosed with that. We were taken on this roller coaster ride that I never bought a ticket to, and I couldn't get off. And I was stuck in a room and absolutely bombarded with, this is the next 3.5 years worth of treatment, like bombarded in the first evening. And yeah, you kind of just sign things. We'll talk about that later, but we went along the chemotherapy route because A, I had no choice, and B, I didn't know any different. I didn't know any better back then.
What do you mean you had no choice?
So I said to the doctor that day, when she put in front of me, it's called a pink slip. And she put in front of me this pink slip, and legally by law, they have to tell you all the side effects. You have to sign this piece of paper for them to give them the permission to go ahead with chemotherapy and anything else they want to do, basically the next 3.5 years. And so they have to tell you the side effects. And so she slid this piece of paper in front of me and she said, okay, read the side effects, liver failure, heart failure, organ failure, in like just overall. And, his hair's going to fall out. His skin's probably going to fall off. He's going to lose his appetite. He's going to lose weight, blah, 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 death, all. And it said death on there, secondary cancers. So they told me chemo causes cancer. They told me, and she said, you need to sign this piece of paper. And I said, well,
what, like straight away, just as she's given it to you?
In that afternoon, I was literally bombarded with, this is the next 3.5 years worth of his treatment. This is going to happen tomorrow morning. We need you to sign it now, because if you don't, he's going to die. And all of this very now, and I was in the room by myself with this doctor, just me and this doctor. And I'm, of course, like, my world's upside down. Literally 2 hours earlier, my son's been diagnosed with cancer, and I've heard those words. My world's upside down, and they're bombarding me. And there's a saying in the army, actually, bullshit baffles brains. So the more bullshit you can give somebody, the more you can just and they'll agree to anything. And so I looked at her and I said, well, hang on a minute. My son, to look at my son, he didn't look sick. He had the second highest leukemic count that hospital had ever seen. But he walked in that hospital as if there's nothing wrong with him. And so I said to him, I said, hey, listen, this really sounds like smashing a walnut with a sledgehammer. Is there anything else we can do? This is really harsh. What if I say no? What if I don't sign this piece of paper? And she said, well, Mrs. Blackwell, if you don't sign this piece of paper, then your son is going to be made a ward of the court. He will go with a foster carer, and a foster carer will sit by his bed instead of you. And it's much better that he goes through this with somebody that he knows than somebody who doesn't. Sign here. Cool. I still get goosebumps even now. And so of course my hands are tied, and I'm like, well, I can't go up against the industrial medical complex. And I didn't know anything better. I didn't know of a way to I didn't know what I know now. Things have been very different if I had it done. And so of course I signed it. And so the next morning, chemotherapy started, everything started. He went down to theatre, had a line put in and everything. And so I realized then at that point, I have no choice. No matter what goes on, I have no choice. And of course, you go through the hospitals and you see the posters all over the hospitals, we will not, you will be removed by security if you raise your voice, or we feel threatened or anything like that. So you can't even say, hey, I don't like what you're doing to me here, because they'll say, oh, I feel threatened, and you'll be removed, So it's it's the mafia, it's the medical mafia. And so we went through the next 18 months of chemotherapy. He spent a lot of time in hospital because he would get infection after infection and temperature after temperature. And the protocol is, the second you get a temperature over 38 degrees, you're in hospital for at least 3 days, antibiotics, all this stuff. So spent a lot of that 18 months in hospital. And then he lost a lot of weight because they gave him a protocol. And the first time they gave him a protocol, it gave him pancreatitis. He lost a lot of weight. And the second time it was on the protocol, I said, well, hang on a minute. Let's not do that again, because look what happened last time. And they said, oh, the chances of that is 1 in 1,000. And so they did it again. And lo and behold, he got pancreatitis again, and he lost a lot of weight. And so he was on a lot of supplements at that time as well, but a lot of them would make him sick. And so this dietitian, children's oncology dietitian, comes in the room, and she's like, hey, I have this innocuous powder. It's just like this white powder, doesn't taste of anything, doesn't smell, put it in everything. It's like, okay. So I did, because the dietitians told me to. They also told me to feed him McDonald's every Saturday night on the children's oncology ward. They would get free Burger King, all they could eat, because...
Are you joking?
No, the kids looked forward to it. My son actually was really excited if he could go into hospital on a Saturday, because he would get free Burger King. And I would go down, I'd queue up, and I'd get him whatever he wanted. And it was that kind of thought of, I'd rather eat something than nothing, but actually now fasting is far better than feeding you full of junk. But I didn't know back then. And of course, that's what the doctors are telling me to do. That's what the doctors are telling everybody to do. And the dietitians are there backing it up. And so, of course, the kids are like, yeah, you try and fight against the kid. No, you can't have McDonald's because it's bad for you. Like, doctor says it's good for me. It's like, oh, it's this turmoil continuously. And so I give him this powder, and she gives me a 5-kilo tub of this stuff, and I just put it in everything, put his weight back on. Tremendous, brilliant, it worked, did what it needed to do. But then about 3 months later, he starts saying his tonsils are hurting. And I'm like, okay, well, we're in for chemotherapy every other day. And he's checked out every week by his oncologist. And I bring it up. I say, his tonsils are hurting. They look at them and they go, oh yeah, there's some holes in there. Or then the next month, oh, they've gone black. The next month they've gone white. The next month. And this went on for 6 months of me saying, can we see someone? What if this is a secondary cancer? To which I was told I was ridiculous. There's no way it can be a secondary cancer. And I said, well, you'd said that chemo causes cancer. So why am I being ridiculous? And they said, no, it can't be. Eventually, after 6 months, they got him into an ENT surgeon who said, these need to come out immediately. I've never seen anything like it. And when the doctor pulled out his tonsils, he said, I had to rip them out. I couldn't cut them out. They were calcified. They were hard as stone. I've never seen anything. We need to send them off to histology. And I was like, okay. It took them 8 weeks to come back to say that this was a secondary cancer. And this was actually a cancer called Langerhans cell sarcoma, of which there's only been 50 cases since records began. And he was the only person in the entire world to have leukemia and Langerhans cell sarcoma and be like battling both of them, facing both of them. So he was an anomaly. They didn't know what to do with him. So the words that they used were, we're going to give him everything we can without killing him. So they gave him adult doses of everything. They experimented on him. He was a guinea pig, their words. They experimented on him. They threw the book at him, everything they could. He ended up having another 6 months of chemotherapy, which he almost died.
What was life like for him during that chemotherapy process?
Man, live. I mean, he was 10 to 14 through the whole thing. And I mean, he lost his childhood. He spent 2 years of that in isolation, like pure isolation, with nobody around. We've been in sealed rooms where I had to get scrubbed up to go in just to sit with him, and it was, I mean, he's autistic, right? So one of the things he said to me was like, well, do you know, Mom, he said, I think my autism's really helping me because I'm okay on my own. I'm okay on my own and I'm okay in my own little world. So like, I'm not so sad about it. But he watched his friends on Facebook growing up and getting girlfriends and riding their bikes and all of these things. And he just had to sit in the hospital room and play on his PlayStation. That's all he had. And so I think he spent a lot of time with himself and in his own mind. And I think that's why he became the person that he did, with like on a spiritual level as well. He had to face his own mortality at a very young age.
Did he understand that he was dying?
He understood everything. I was absolutely 100% honest with him the whole time because I was not going to lie to him. In fact, when he was first diagnosed, the first room we sat in and these 4 doctors came. When 4 doctors come in and sit in front of you, you know it ain't good, right? So they sit down in front of us and they say, so, we've been looking at Deryn's blood and Deryn has leukemia. And I just immediately burst into tears because the only experience I'd had of leukemia was the kid I went to school with who got leukemia and within 3 weeks was dead. And so like, I just burst into tears. My ex-husband who's with me at the time just went silent. And because Deryn looked at me and said, what does that mean? And I said, it's blood cancer. And of course, he immediately burst into tears. And the doctor said, you shouldn't have told him that. And I said, I'm not going to lie to him. Like, what do you want me to do? Lie? Don't chastise me for telling him the truth. I've been honest with my kids from day dot. I'm not going to lie. They have to know what they're facing because otherwise, how can they face it with everything they have if they don't know what they're facing? And how can we go through it together? How could you keep, and I know a lot of families that did keep that from their children. I know a lot of families who took their children to hospice and their kids had no idea why they were there. And I mean, you do you, I do understand and I don't judge for it, but I personally couldn't have lived my life trying to hide something like that from my kids, So, and actually the one time when they did diagnose him again with a secondary cancer, I tried to hide it for about a split second. And he looked at me and goes, what are you hiding? I was like, I can't hide anything from these kids. So, brute honesty was the best policy.
And would he ever turn around and say like, Mum, am I going to die? Hi guys, me again. Sorry to interrupt this episode, but I have to tell you about Myco. Now, if you've been following me for even 5 minutes, you'll know I've been shouting from the rooftops about how functional mushrooms have completely changed my life. Brain fog's gone, my sleep is sorted, anxiety is down, and my energy is up. Now, a lot of you have been asking which mushrooms I use myself, and the answer is Myco's liquid mushroom extracts. All of Myco's extracts are grown in small batches in the UK. They are 100% organic and completely alcohol-free. These are truly the highest quality functional mushrooms available on the market. But guys, don't just take my word for it. Go and try it yourself. Go to mycodrink.com and use code Brogan for 10% off. Thank me later.
He actually, from the day dot, he said, I'm not going to die from this, you know? And I said, okay. And I actually had my own experiences with my own faith, which was very interesting. I can go into it if you want me to. It's not a long story, but so it was about 3 months into his diagnosis, and I was in the kitchen. I was getting all his meds together and everything, and we were about to go into hospital again. And I had this overwhelming, woe is me, woe is him, this isn't fair, why me, why him, he's just a kid, take me, leave him alone, all that kind of moment that I went through. And I had 2 windows in my kitchen in my little council house, and I walked past the window and this beam of sun just came in and hit me that I stopped in my tracks. I just stood still and I heard, he's not going to die. I heard it audibly, he's not going to die. And I felt it in the pit of my stomach, in my solar plexus. And I was like, it was a knowing. It was just, and I went, okay. And immediately everything changed for me. I stopped being sad. It's like, I totally believed it. And so almost, and he reiterated that he'd had a similar experience. So like, I've been told I'm not going to die, you know, so we don't have to worry about it. So we were almost kind of like nonchalant going through it all. It was like, even when he nearly died, there was this, like nearly died through the chemo and stuff. There was this, but he's not going to die. So this is just some shit that we have to get through, right? We just have to ride the waves and ride the roller coaster. And one day this will end and it's all good. And so we managed to have this kind of, we walked in faith that everything would be okay. And so, when they decided that a bone marrow transplant was the only way to stop either cancers coming back. So the cancer in his throat, actually had a PET scan. And this is where my light bulb moment, everything happened for me, was the PET scan. So he'd had his tonsils removed and everything. And he had lesions in the back of his throat. And they said, well, we need to do a PET scan to see whether or not the cancer has spread, see if it's gone in his lymphatic system, because your tonsils are your biggest part of your lymphatic system. And so we had the PET scan, and I walked in, and he sat there with his little gown on and stuff. And the radiologist comes in with this big lead box. She opens it, and it's got this big fat syringe in it. And it looks like it's stuffed full of like molasses or treacle or something. And I looked at her and I said, what's that? And she said, oh, this is irradiated glucose. And I said, glucose, sugar. She says, yeah. She said, glucose is cancer's favorite form of energy. Without glucose, cancer can't proliferate. She said, so we pump him full of glucose. It's irradiated. In about 90 minutes, we'll push him through a scanner, and any even very small cancer cells we'll be able to see, because they'll light up because they've been munching so hard on the sugar. I went, sugar? She goes, yeah. And I went, oh, okay. So, okay, right. And then she hands me this Geiger counter, and she says, if this starts going up, move away from him.
What's that? Like a radiation thing?
Yeah, Geiger counter measures radiation. So I look at this Geiger counter and I'm like, so if I have to move away from him because he's now radioactive, I was like, you've just pumped that full into his veins, right? And so I thought no more of it, really. And we sat there, and he had to be quiet for the whole 90 minutes. And so we were writing things, we were doing charades with each other and stuff. He has the scan, he goes home, and I go into my kitchen, and I hear, turn it around. I was like, turn what around? And I look at the now empty 5 kilo tub that's got a dust in the bottom, and it's sat on top of my fridge. And I turn it around, and there's a label, and it says ingredients 100% glucose.
Sweet Jesus.
And I went, hang on a minute, glucose feeds cancer quicker than anything else. And the dietitian has just made me feed him 5 kilos of glucose, and now his tonsils, and now he has this secondary cancer. And I was like, light bulb, like flashing. I spent a good couple of weeks trying to get my head around, this can't be nefarious. No, this can't be, like, what? Why would they do this? Why would they do this? And I racked my brains, and the only thing I could come out with was that the whole system is nefarious. It's a closed loop system. Get you in there, get you as sick as you possibly can, get as much money out of you as you can. Problem, cause, solution. Feed the cancer whilst treating the cancer with something that causes cancer. Like, when you look at it like that, it doesn't make any sense. The only way it makes sense is that this is evil. That's the only way that it makes sense to me. And so
with this new understanding and light bulb moment, did you ever confront any staff, or the next time you saw the dietitian, or when you the doctor, did you keep that in?
The dietitians began to hate me because I started to get really like picky with them, and I'm like, no, he's not having the free Burger King. No, he's not having this. No, and they were like, well, he needs his energy. And I was like, not from that, like, and they would argue with me over things, well, this is what we do. He needs to put weight on, and it's like, but sugar, and they're like, no, the body needs sugar, and it kind of, they again, bullshit baffles brains. They're trying to like confuse you so much. I'm like, I believe the radiologist, like I will, because otherwise a PET scan doesn't work. If sugar doesn't feed cancer, then a PET scan doesn't work. So, and so yeah, he had to go through another 5 months of chemo, and then eventually we moved from Norfolk all the way over to Bristol because that was the nearest hospital that would do the transplant. And then he had to have more radiotherapy. We had 30 rounds of radiotherapy. He had the mask where he was like pinned down to a table. He had to have 8 rounds of that, and he had to have, in total, he had 30 rounds of radiation. And
Sweet
like
Jesus.
Another 2-3 weeks of like really intense chemo. They had to basically destroy his bone marrow completely. So then on the 1st of March 2013, he had his first bone marrow transplant, and this was from a donor, from a guy in Germany, and it went really well until it didn't. And then basically he had adenovirus, and adenovirus is just a virus, just something to me and you, it's just a common cold. No one's going to die from that. If you have no functioning immune system, then of course you can. And so he has this adenovirus. The bone marrow transplant is in, it's kicked in, but the adenovirus isn't going anywhere. So they start giving medication for that, and that medication kills the bone marrow. So medication to treat a cold kills the immune system, which, again, make it make sense. And so they kill his bone marrow transplant. So they give him another bone marrow transplant from the same guy again. And this time it kicks in, it engrafts, which is when you start making your own red blood products. That's when they say it's engraft. So it engrafted, and again, he starts doing quite well, but the adenovirus is still there. And this time he had graft versus host disease really bad, which, if you imagine, if you have a liver transplant, your immune system sees the liver as a foreign object. So it tries to reject the liver. So you have to be on immune suppressants like for the rest of your life if you have a transplant. So you have to, subdue that so it doesn't reject the organ. Now, when you have a bone marrow transplant, that is the new immune system. So your entire body is a foreign object because you have somebody else's immune system. So your entire body is a foreign object. So he was on immune suppressants, which actually caused brain damage. At one point, he started having seizures because they had to put him on such high amounts of that. And his skin started to he turned into like a lizard. It was horrible. And his mouth fell out. And when I say his mouth fell out, he had such ulceration from his mouth all the way to the other end of him. They did biopsies. They put a camera down and a tube up, and they cut 12 pieces from inside of him to check. And his guts, he ruined him, absolutely ruined him. And lo and behold, it failed anyway because of the adenovirus and the treatment for that. So it failed. And so they said, listen, we took a rescue dose, which is before he had the conditioning and the radiation, they took this big bag of his own bone marrow. Thank God. They don't do that anymore because of costs, right? So if your bone marrow transplant fails, you're dead. Sorry, because of money. So they took this rescue dose and they put it in a freezer, and they said, listen, we have the rescue dose. We're going to give him his own cells back. We're not bothering with the donor anymore. There's too many problems.
So can you just withdraw the donor then?
So So what happened was the bone marrow transplant had failed. So all of the bone marrow was empty. There was no cells left. They were, they done tests. There's nothing in there. So it's like, okay, the donor's now been visited, gone. And so they said, we're going to give him his own cells back. Said nobody's not engrafted with their own cells. This is a done deal. This can't go wrong. And you're like, okay. And they said, but what we are going to do is we're not going to treat the adenovirus anymore. And I said, okay. And they said, so either the bone marrow transplant kicks in within around about 25 days or the adenovirus gets him in that time. It's a race. One of them is going to win. I suggest you pray. To which I went, okay, I'm going to pray to the Google gods. The adenovirus is just a cold, for goodness sake. Surely there's something else. Surely there's something. So I looked up, I went and I prayed to the Google gods, and I said, okay, Google gods, natural remedies for adenovirus. And it came back with a list as long as your arm: echinacea, olive leaf extract, lipospheric vitamin C, Pau-Darco tea, manuka honey, blah, 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 So off I went, ran down to Holland and Barrett, and I stocked up. I spent about 300 quid, and I stocked up all this stuff. And I came back and I just started pumping it into him. Like three cups of tea a day with all this manuka honey. And I just started whacking it into him. And it was working. His adenovirus count was coming down. It was 3.2 million at its worst, which is like massive. And it started to come down gradually. Now, the bone marrow transplant's still nowhere to be seen. So it has to be this. This is the only thing that's changed. They're not treating it. They've said, we're letting nature take its thingy. So then one day a doctor comes in, and I've managed to get his count down to like 1,000, and his bone marrow transplant's still not there. I've managed to do it, and I'm feeling awesome about myself. You know, I'm like, yay, like nature for the win. This
Super
is great.
mum.
He's not gonna die.
Yeah.
And this doctor comes in, and anybody that reads my book, he's called Dr. Doom for a very good reason. Dr. Doom comes in, he's like, something's going on. I'm like, what's going on? And he said, yet again, Deryn looks very healthy, but his numbers are saying that he's very, very, very sick. And I was like, what do you mean? He said his count is 3.2 million. And I said, no, it can't. I said, no, it can't be. I said, it was 1,000 this morning. Like it can't be. I said, is there any way we've made a mistake? No, absolutely not. Can we make a mistake that large? And I said, well, what is it? Maybe I said 3.2 million. That's a bit of a coinkydink. Maybe like maybe we're just reading the wrong. No. And I was like, oh my God, well, that means my kid's going to die then. That means that everything that I've done has not worked. It was like a placebo. I don't know what, but obviously it's not going to. So he's like, this isn't good. And he then, as he's walking out the room, he looks at the table covered in all of this stuff, all the natural remedies. And he goes, what's all this then? And I went, well, olive leaf extract does such and such, and lipospheric vitamin C does this, and Pau d'Arco does this, and Manuka honey does this. And he turned and looked at me and went, well, it's not working, is it? And he walked out the room. And I was left with like, you're taking glee for the fact that that's not working. That means my kid's going to die. And you think that's funny? Like, I wanted to stab him. I
don't think I'd be allowed out of that hospital.
Ooh, that was a moment for me where I really had to I was a bouncer for 7 years, right? So I'm ghetto. There's ghetto in there. If you really want to push me, like, I know I could choke you out if I know how to hurt you. And I'm a medic, so I know how to heal you too, but I'd probably leave that bit. But that really that
triggering. Wow.
It hurt me hard. And I was staying in a house called Charlie's house, which was just around the corner. It's a charity house that they put me up in so that I could be very close to Deryn, but not be in the hospital with him. So at least I could get some rest. And I said to him, it was about 11 o'clock at night. I was like, dude, I'm going to go. I'm going to go back to the house. Are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. So I go to leave, and this other doctor comes to the door. I've never seen him before, never seen him again. Comes to the door and he says, oh, Mrs. Blackwell, I'm glad I caught you. I said, yeah, what's going on? I said, I don't need any more news today. And he goes, well, I have some good news. He said there was a mix-up in the lab. His count is 900 and something. Vindication, man. Like, if ever you felt vindicated, I was like, motherfucking knew it. Like,
yeah.
I go home, I have a good sleep, I get back in the morning, and Dr. Doom walks in with this like shit-eating grin on his face. He's like, oh, I got some news. I went, yeah, no, don't worry. Another doctor put me out of my misery last night. I said, so not working? No, not working. And he kind of just looked at me and walked away. I was like, yeah, you dirty.
Yeah.
Oh, man. There was loads of instances like that, a number of instances like that. So thankfully, adenovirus goes away, bone marrow kicks in, awesome. His own bone marrow's in. We're like, yes, this is great. Everything's going the right way. And then they pull me into the office and they're like, something's going on. We've done a chimerism test. Now, a chimerism, if anybody has ever seen a cat that's like half black and half brindle, that's a chimerism cat. That's like, it's half of thingy. And so chimerism tests are to see what's going on in the bone marrow, what cells belong to who, what's going on. They say something's going on with Deryn. We've never seen this before. I'm like, oh God, here we go again. I've heard a lot of, we've never seen this before. And they say, listen, the T cells are all Deryn's, but all of the other cells are the donors. And I was like, you said the donor had gone. What do you mean? And they said, we don't know, like whatever's going, like his own bone marrow is kickstarted. There must have been something left by the donor. We don't know. And what do you think is going to happen? I said, you're asking me? Like, you guys are the ones paid 100-something grand a year. Like, what are you asking me for? And they said, what do you think is going to happen? And I said, well, looking at these numbers and looking at what I know about bone marrow transplants, likelihood is the two immune systems are going to battle to the death and this is going to fail. And they said, probably. And that's exactly what happened. So his third bone marrow transplant failed from his own cells. And it was like, oh my God, like, can this, and thank God, like I thank the stars every day that somebody had the good sense to split his rescue bag into two. So he had one chance left, like one more bag of his own cells left. And they said, listen, we want to give him more chemo. because we want to make sure there's absolutely nothing in there, right? We want to give him more chemo. And Deryn said, no, let me die. Leave me alone. I've had enough. This has gone on too long. I'm done. Now I'll go back a little bit to like 3 months earlier in a conversation that me and Deryn had when we were in between transplant 2 and 3. And I was sat on the edge of the toilet, you know, he sat in the bathroom just chatting away to him. And I said to him, dude, how are you not pissed at the world? I was like, you know, he was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, autism and ADHD at age 8. He's always been a little bit weird and kooky. And then, you know, the apple don't fall far from the tree, I can tell you that. And, you know, and then cancer at 10, cancer at 12, and all of this treatment and nearly dying. And, you know, all these operations, he'd been cut, burnt and poisoned beyond recognition at this point, you know. And I said, how are you not angry? And he said, well, Mum, I chose this. How can I be angry? I was like, okay, embellish with me, dude. And he said, Mum, throughout our many lives, our souls need to experience all there is to experience. And only when our souls are strong enough can we go on and face our biggest challenge. This is my biggest challenge. I'm not coming back. This is it for me. I was like, okay. And he said, so how can I be mad? I signed up for this. This is what my soul needs to evolve. I can't be mad at this because I asked for it, basically. I was like, okay. And he said, I chose you. We chose one another because we both need to learn lessons. He said, I chose Dad because he needed to learn a lot more. And he said, but we chose each other and we chose all of this. And I was like, okay, and at the time I was like, it resonated with me hard, but it was almost like, if that's what you need to believe in order to get you through this, like,
yeah, fine. Who am I to piss on your chips?
Exactly. I'm not here to like call you a liar. Like, and I absolutely believe it. And he said it with such conviction. Like, how could Truth. I not, you know? And so this months later, when they say we need to give him more chemo and he's like, nah, let me die. I went, Deryn, let me remind you, you chose me, not just because we needed to learn lessons. You chose me because I'm a tenacious motherfucker and I'm not going to let you give up when there's a chance. I'm not going to let that happen. If there's no other chances, absolutely, I'll let you go, you know, but no, we have, you know, we have to see this through, remember, dude. And ultimately, what happens if you give up now? And he said, I have to come back and do it again. I don't want to. And I was like, well, let's get this done then. So he had chemo, he had his 4th and final bag. 2 days after he had his bone marrow transplant, he traps his fingers down the side of his bed and he picks up 2 catastrophic infections in his hand, and he's already got a catastrophic infection in his mouth. He had Klebsiella in his mouth, which like ate a quarter of his tongue, and he had herpes whitlow and cellulitis in his hand from the trapping it down the bed, and it just started tracking up his arm. His fingers died. They basically went black from the knuckles. So they're talking about amputation, they're talking about, you know, all these things. And I'm like, look, leave the kid alone. Like, he's dying. Like, because the bone marrow transplant can't do anything. Anything the bone marrow transplant is kind of creating, the infections are just wiping it out immediately. So he's on all these antibiotics, a plethora of them. You know, I called it the conscious life support machine, where he was awake and he was aware, but these bags hanging up were apparently the only thing keeping him here. And so they were talking about amputation, and I was like, dude, is there anything else we can do? Like, he was on fentanyl at this point. He'd been on fentanyl throughout the treatment, but he'd been on pethidine. They put him in a K-hole. Like, he gave him ketamine. He was just in a real bad way. And so I prayed to the Google gods again. And I was like, natural painkillers, there has to be something else. And up came cannabis. And I was like, oh, I didn't know it had done that. I'd read some things about cannabis and cancer and stuff like that, but cancer wasn't the issue right now. This was failed treatment. This is, they've maimed him, you know, they've absolutely destroyed him. But obviously the 2 cancers are in the bone marrow. So the bone marrow they gave back to him, the 2 cancers are there lurking, you know. And so I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, pain. And I was like, okay, I haven't really thought about it. And I found this drug called Bedrocan, which is a prescribed drug in Europe, mainly in kind of Amsterdam, that area. And I'd read a story about a guy who'd got a prescription for it, gone over to Amsterdam, brought it back because he had this prescription. And I said, hey, listen, I'll drive to bloody Amsterdam. I'll get on the tunnel right now. I'll drive to Amsterdam, whatever it takes. Can we try this? And they said, no, it's not licensed for children. Chemotherapy is not licensed for children. Like, most of the shit they pump into our babies is not licensed for children. But hey, don't let that stop you. So I was a bodybuilder at the time, and I was going to the gym like a couple of hours in the morning. It was the only thing that kept me sane and stopped me from bashing the heads of the doctors. To be perfectly honest with you, like, pick up some things and drop them again. Do that repeatedly, and that will get your stress out. And while I was in the gym, I met this guy. We'll call him Bob.
Yeah, let's call Bob.
Let's call him Bob. And Bob, me and Bob were training he was a bodybuilder, and we were training quite hard together. And one day he turns around to me and goes, have you thought about cannabis? And I said, actually, Bob, keeps coming up, kind of have. And he goes, I have a 4-bedroom house that I rent and every room is full of it. Do you want some? And I was like,
yes.
Yeah, Bob.
Yes.
Yes, please, Bob. I'll have a seat, please, Bob. And so, yeah, we meet up with him and we get like an ounce and I just make it into this vegetable glycerin. I was going to put it in a vape pen, just like a little pressy vape cart thing. And so I found this recipe online and there I was cooking it all up in the house. And I just made this vegetable glycerin beautiful. It looked like honey and it smelled gorgeous. And I was like, so I put it in the vape pen and I was giving it to him to try and deal with his pain. And it didn't even touch the sides. It did nothing. It made him a bit giggly and it made him kind of like, hee. And we'd draw the curtains and the vapors would come out and we'd be like, we're trying to get it gone before the nurse came in. One of us would watch by the door, And but it really didn't touch the sides. It did nothing. And so he ended up, the hand doctors came in and said, we want to amputate his hands. And I said, listen, the kid's dying, like just sever the nerves, just cauterize and sever the nerves so he can't feel it. And the doctor said, well, that's rather permanent. And I said, as opposed to an amputation, he's a lizard. Is it going to grow back? I was like, where'd you get your qualifications from? Back of a Weetabix box? Like, what's going on here? Who am I dealing with? It's rather permanent. I was like, the kid's dying. And he said, oh, they didn't tell us that bit. And I said, no, of course they didn't, because arse elbow, like no communication. Anybody that goes to hospital knows that nobody talks to one another, and really frustrating. So they agreed. They said, okay, we'll do it's called a neurectomy, but he will never feel his hand again. He'll never use his hand again. I said, I don't care. So they took him into surgery. And they did. They cut open. They didn't just sever, but they actually cauterized. So they said, listen, we've made it so that like he's never going to feel that hand ever again. But they did also take a lot of the like dead material away. And they said, listen, there's no blood flow going there. So like it's pretty gross under there. We're probably looking at gangrene at some point if this continues on, if he lives long enough. And they said, we put these big Mickey Mouse bandages on. They said, under no circumstances must you take these bandages off. It has to be done in a surgical environment. I said, okay, cool. So he has these big fat bandages. Because they're so stiff, he could still like play his PlayStation, which made him real happy. So, but that was it. We were like, okay, well, it got to day 46 after the transplant and they took me in the room and they said, listen, nobody's engrafted after 30 days. If it doesn't happen after 30 days, it's not going to happen. And we're like pushing day 50 now. Like there's no chance. We've come to the end of the road. There's nothing more that we can do. We need to take him to a hospice. This is it. And of course you lead up to that point. I'd heard there's only 3 things we could do. There's only 2 things we could do. There's only 1 thing left. And you get there and you're like, you see it coming a mile off, but you hope that there's a turn in the road before you get there, right? You don't ever want to hear that. And I'm sat in this room with 4 doctors by myself again, and 2 of the doctors are crying. And these are the 2 amazing doctors, Dr. Ponni and Dr. Barbara. And they have their real names because they're really cool people. Anybody that's not a cool person gets a completely different name. Okay. Yeah. So Ponni and Barbara are crying their eyes out because they're amazing. And this other doctor starts telling me about, well, we'll give him this drug so that he doesn't bleed out of every orifice because that could be really messy. And we'll do this because of that. And I was like, this is my kid you're talking about. Can you stop? Like, just stop. And they said, well, we want to give you all the details. I was like, I don't need it right now. And I said, listen, all I want to know is when I take him off this conscious life support machine, how long are we talking? And he said 3 days a week at most, if you're lucky. When do you want to go? I don't know. I'll go and ask him. So I went and asked him. I walked in the room and he said, okay, how long have I got? What have they said? And I said 3 days a week at most. And he said, okay, let's go get it over and done with. Let's go. He said, I want out of here. Let's go. And they did say to me that we probably could keep him alive for probably another 6-7 months on the antibiotics and stuff. And I said, no. They said, I would rather he had 3 days out of this environment in a place where there's a ball pit and a jacuzzi and he gets nice food and he just gets to hang out than 7 more months of this. Are you kidding me? I was like, this is no life. Let's go. And even at this point, we were still kind of nonchalant. Well, yeah, but he's not going to die. He's not going to die, and this is just something we will get. And it'll turn around eventually. It will. There's going to be a turnaround. And of course, the more you get to like the impending thing coming, you start questioning your own decisions and own sanity and own knowing. And you start questioning your intuition and things like that. And so we picked him up and 3 days later, we took him to a hospice. But on that evening, I walked out of the hospital and I was like, all right, big man. All right, big man. You've told me he's not going to die. Okay, big man. Listen, I'm going to make a deal with you. And if you let my son live, I promise to spend the rest of my life every single day helping people. I'll serve you, humanity, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it. Like, I'll spend every day helping others. Like, just let him live. And so we carried on, took him to a hospice.
What was that like?
hospices are beautiful places. They really are. And the people that work in those hospices are absolute angels. They don't do things the way that I would do them personally, but they do things that they can do in the stipulations and the parameters that they have to work within, right? Because all of these people within this system, I don't blame anybody within this system. I hate some of the doctors, absolutely. And I hated a few of the nurses who were just like horrible people. They wasn't because they were nurses or doctors, it's because they were just gross people. But I understand that this entire system, they have a set box of tools, right? And they don't look outside of that set of tools because A, they don't have time, B, they've paid a lot of money and got into a lot of debt to be told these lies, and C, that's just what they're told. They're programmed, they're conditioned. So the system takes people with beautiful hearts who want to care and love and look after people, and they hijack those good hearts and they make these people do their dirty work for them under the guise of healthcare. So I know that these aren't bad people. They're just people trying to work within a parameter and love people within that system. And so I don't blame any of them, really. Even the horrible doctors, I get it, you know. So the hospice workers, yeah, they were amazing. And he was really enjoying himself. And we took him in the jacuzzi with a plastic bag on his arm so we didn't get the bandages wet. And he didn't go anywhere within 3 days. He didn't go anywhere within a week. He didn't go anywhere within 2 weeks. And he's still hanging on.
And what was that? Were you using CBD then?
No,
no.
I'd completely put the cannabis to one side. I hadn't even really thought about it, but I still had the jar of tincture and I actually hid it right underneath the bed, like at the back, so that it couldn't be found, because obviously it's really illegal.
Yeah.
It was high THC, you know, it wasn't CBD, it was high THC with some CBD in it, but it was street weed effectively. And so, you know, he just kind of hung on and he starts getting really anxious because, like, why am I not dead yet? Why am I not dead yet? They said 3 days. We planned everything. Planned the funeral he wanted it to be fancy dress. And if anybody who knows Russell Howard, go search on YouTube for Russell Howard Cancer Boy and you will find an entire story. He wanted it all to be, you know, he wanted to go in Winston Churchill's hearse. Like, he planned the music, the venue, and we just sat there. It was like event planning. We're planning this party basically. But his organs are shutting down and I'm having to aspirate his nose tube like every half an hour, otherwise he would vomit. Like, over a pint of bile would come out and then his nose tube would come out and they'd have to put another one in. And it was just, everything was shutting down and everything was on this downward spiral, you know. But it got to day 69
in the hospice.
So we're in we left the hospital on day 49. So we've now been in the hospice for 20 days.
So what did they say? Just, we're gonna let you go because we don't think you're dying, or?
Well, at this point, it was like, I said to him, I was like, I need another test because you said you'd be dead within 3 days, a week at most if we're lucky. Almost 3 weeks later, we're still here. I need another test to make sure that we have made the right decision here, you know, because what's going on? They said it was a Lazarus moment. They just said, you know, being outside of the hospital environment, he's just enjoying his life and it's a Lazarus moment. I was like, well, it's a bloody long Lazarus moment. But so on day 69, I say, listen, I want a bone marrow aspirate, which is where they go into the ball joint of the hip. They take a big needle. It looks like a screwdriver actually. And he'd had a number of these over the years. And I said, I want another one of those tests done for you to tell me there's absolutely nothing in there and we're not making the wrong decision here and there's no intervention that we can have. Because I'd signed a do not resuscitate. There was no intervention happening. You know, there was no help. If he was to get a temperature, it would just be let nature take its course. No antibiotics, no nothing, you know, just morphine, anti-sickness and sleeping tablets at this point. And so I said, I need a test. So they did it. And they came back and I'll never forget, I stood outside the door of his room and the nurse came and she handed me this piece of paper and she said, I'm so sorry, there's nothing in there. And I said, nothing at all. She said, no, there's nothing in there. It's completely empty. His neutrophil count, anybody that knows anything about bloods, neutrophil count is part of the white blood count where we would predominantly measure that. Anything under 1 means they're neutropenic, which means they're very susceptible to an infection. Anything above 1 is like you're a little bit safer. So his neutrophil count was 0.0005. That's nothing. It's empty. His platelets were 0, had been for months on end. His red blood cells were virtually nothing. You know, he was very anemic, had no immune system, nothing. And I said, okay. And I walk back in the room and I say, Deryn goes, so, and I'm like, nothing in there. He goes, good. I was like, I agree with you because this is taking the piss now. Like, what's going on? It was such a bizarre, there was such a bizarre kind of thing of events. And so he'd actually said very specifically to his, so you make a death plan in a hospice, the same as you make a birth plan. And honestly, they ignore them as much as they ignore the birth plan. He'd said on his death plan, I don't want to die on morphine. He said, Mum, they've taken everything else from me. They're not having my death. I want to experience a transition. Don't let them numb me. Okay, so as his advocate, that's what I tried to do. And they started to pump the morphine because he's getting anxious. And I was like, no, take it away. He doesn't want to die like that. And so he's getting very anxious. And day 69, I'm kind of sat there with him, and I hear, put it in his mouth. Put what in his mouth? And I looked, and my eyes are like put down towards this jar. And I was like, well, cannabis chills you out, doesn't it? Like, okay. So I get out this jar and I pull up a 5 ml syringe and I just put it under his tongue. And within moments, I watched the anxiety disappear. I watched him. It was like a body scan. I went over him and I watched him go from like this to just, and he leaned back in his bed and he started grinning from ear to ear. And he just looked at me and he went, I'm good. And I was like, fantastic. Like, this is going to give him the death he wants. This is a miracle. It's going to give him a death of dignity, not on morphine, compos mentis, awake, because morphine he was just out of it. He was constantly out of it. And I'd already, at that point, it felt like I'd lost my son before already lost him. He was so off his face. And so I remember the nurse then coming to the door with this drug called cyclizine, which is an anti-sickness drug. Now, he was really addicted to that because he said it was like a warm, fuzzy blanket. And he was so addicted that when we were in the hospital, they would actually hook it up to it was supposed to be put over a 5-minute period, either like this with a nurse or in a syringe driver. Got to the point in the hospital, they felt so sorry for him. They'd just come in, they'd hook it up to his line, they'd put it in his hand and he'd bang it into himself. And that gave him the feeling of heroin. And so he became really addicted. And so the nurses knew not to be late with this stuff, right? So the nurses turned up at the door, bang on time. And he looked at her and he went, oh, you can take that. I don't want it. So I looked at her, I looked at him, I looked at her, and I went, you sure? And he's like, I'm good. I don't need it. And I went, take it away before he changes his mind. Just take it away. That was gone. Morphine was gone. Sleeping tablets gone. Nothing. Just the cannabis. So,
but obviously at this point, it's just your little secret, you two.
Yes.
Does he know that you've given him cannabis?
Oh, he knows. Yeah, he knows what it is. I'm like, dude, will you take? He's like, yeah, sure. He was up for it. He was like, anything. I don't care. So yeah, it's just mine, his little secret. I'm giving it to him like 4 or 5 times a day, and it gets to day 7. It gets to day 74 after transplant, and I got overwhelmed again with this like, woe is me. And I'm stood in the bathroom of his room, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I all of a sudden just like, you lied to me. You told me he wasn't going to die. And look where we're at. Like, he's pretty dying. Like, you lied. You told me he wasn't going to die. You told me this wasn't going to happen. I believed you. I trusted you. Never again will I trust you. Like, you, God, like, or whatever it is that told me, like, you. And I really had a moment with myself. And the next morning, or the next dinner time, like lunchtime-ish, we were in the lounge and he's fallen asleep watching a film. He pulls his hand out from between his legs and a bandage comes off his finger. And he looks at me and he goes, Mum, look at my finger. I was like, what? He goes, look at my finger. I was like, what am I looking at? Because all I could see was a pink finger. And he goes, Mum, my fucking finger. And I went, oh my God. Like, the bandage was off and his finger had healed. Now I know for a fact that you can't even replace skin cells without a functioning immune system. So I was like, oh, something's happening here. So I call the doctor in, or I call the nurse in. I'm like, hey, we need to put a bandage back on this finger because, and she went, oh my God, we need to do a blood test. I said, 5 days ago, it wasn't in his blood. It's not, or in his bone marrow. It's not going to be in his blood. She said, we need to do a blood test. They did the blood test. About 2 hours later, they came back, slid this piece of paper across the table at me. I turned it over and his neutrophil count was 0.25, from 0.0005 to 0.25. And his reds had like held and his platelets had held. And I went, holy shit. She goes, he's not dying. He goes, Mark, because he's not dying anymore. And I was like, like, what? Oh my God. So they shredded the do not resuscitate forms, like everything. The whole hospice was just like, and they said this was a miracle. They said there was no way in the world scientifically this could happen, so this has to be a miracle. I was like, yeah, God can have it, because God's not going to prison, is he? Yeah. So God can have it, absolutely. And then I heard, see, in my time, not yours. I was like, oh my God. So my beautiful. My faith is like, you cannot, if I get a no in, or my faith is just unshakable, which is, well, and his, he goes, it was funny actually, he said to me a little while after that, he goes, well, I always said that I wasn't going to die. He said, when I was like dying and planning everything, he said, I was just more pissed off that I was wrong. He said, but I'm not wrong. And I was like, no, you're never wrong, Deryn. He goes, no, not. So it was very interesting that the doctor walked into the room with him and was like, Deryn, you're not dying anymore. Like, if you get a temperature, what do you want us to do? And he said, you can leave me the fuck alone. And she said, oh my God, that's a bit flippant. I said, half an hour ago, the kid's dying. Like, he's got his head around it. He's planned his funeral. Now you're telling him he's not. But the road to recovery for him was so insurmountable. I mean, you know, his organ, he still felt like death. He still felt like he wanted to die, you know? And so I said to the team at that time, I said, is this him like now for good? Are we going to carry on? And they said, oh, I don't know. He could drop down dead in the next 2 weeks. And they said this in front of him. And so for him, it's like there was no kind of certainty.
Well, he's had no safety in anything, in even like his death or living or treatment. He's just, it must be so just disturbing as well.
Yeah, it was just, yeah, you're absolutely right. No security or safety in anything. And so I was like, can he have some mental health care? And they said he didn't qualify for any mental health care. They said if he was still just a hematology patient that he would, but now he'd gone on to bone marrow transplant, he no longer qualified for mental health care. And I said, that doesn't make any sense, because if out of the two, the people that are on bone marrow transplant are the ones that need it the most, they're the ones that have gone through it. But somebody said to me only about a year ago, they said, but think about it like this. Those people on bone marrow transplant are more likely to die. So why waste money on them? I was like, yep. I can see that, you know, I could see it. So Deryn actually really struggled, and then decided that he was going to starve himself to death. He was like, I want to die. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go. Let me die. And I was like, I can't just let you starve yourself to death, you know? And so he refused to kind of eat at that point.
So can I ask you, were you using the cannabis along at this point or not?
So I continued to keep giving it. And at that point, actually, when his neutrophils got above 1, I was like, I knew I had a really small window of opportunity to like test this out, whether or not it was the cannabis or whether it was just like an anomaly, because he's been an anomaly the whole time. So I took it away and his blood count halved, and I gave it back and it doubled, and I took it away and it halved and it came back and it doubled. And I watched that over a 6 blood test period. So I knew categorically that the cannabis was having a profound effect on his immune system. So
can I ask you a question? What type of cannabis was this?
So
just
I have
like
no
what
idea
the kids sell on the streets. Is it?
So it was what the guy was growing in his room so that he could sell for a profit. It was street weed. It wasn't. There's no such. That's a whole other thing. There's no such thing as medical cannabis. It's just cannabis, but medical cannabis has been got hold of by big pharma. That's the only difference.
It's just they've just put a label on it because it works.
They just put a label on it, and they've irradiated it and tumble dried it and made it clean. I wouldn't touch medical cannabis if you paid me. Like, no, I don't want big pharma weed. Thank you very much. I don't want you to have control over a plant that I can grow in my garden. It doesn't kill. It's never killed a human being ever. So there's no safety issues with it. So leave me alone. You know.
Right, okay.
I'm very much just grow your own, or we're not free. That's where I am. And so it was just street weed, you know. And so the jar ran out, and it clearly wasn't the right strain to help him with his appetite. It clearly wasn't doing that. So I didn't think no more of it. And then this went on for about 4 or 5 months, and they said we got evicted from the hospice. Couldn't go back home to Norfolk because they wanted us near the hospital, but they didn't want us in the hospital. So they put us in a hostel with 16 other families.
Sweet Jesus.
Oh man, and these families were right on the beginning of their journeys, right? And here we are, veterans, you know, and it's like we've seen things, man. We've been to the NAM and everybody. You know,
it must be really hard to not be in that environment and be like, don't give them sugar. I mean, like, because I feel it becomes.
I was.
Yeah. Because I think it's like a responsibility. Like
you gotta have an obligation.
Yeah, like my boyfriend always says to me, he's like, when I see people, I see like kids with like wireless earphones, I'm like, don't do that, you'll get brain cancer, don't eat that. And he's like, Brogan, stop telling people. And I was like, no, I feel like it's my responsibility, whether you take it or not, is that there are things I wish I knew.
Yeah, if they want to take it, that's entirely on them. But I'm here to deliver a message. If you don't want to hear it, then don't hear it.
Yeah.
Like I think I said to you yesterday about the lighthouse. Shine your light as bright as you fucking can, because there are going to be people who are going to be absolutely like, you're going to be the best thing, and it's going to be what is needed in their life. You're going to be the answer to their prayers by shining your light. There's going to be other people who you blind the shit out of, put their sunglasses on and hate you for it. Can't please everyone all the time. I'm here for the people that care, you know. I want to hear it. So,
and you might have just changed someone's life by just telling them don't have the fucking bucket of glucose.
Yeah, just go look at it. Don't believe me. Go look at it. Ask Google. It ain't hard. Like, it's all on there, you know. So in the age of information, ignorance really is a choice, you know. And I think when we've walked the walk, I've literally walked through hell. I will go back into hell and I will hold your hand and I'll walk back out through with you, but you have to get up and walk. I'm not dragging you. I'm not dragging anybody anymore. So basically, he tried to like kill himself completely, like with this starvation thing. And by this point, I had started reaching out to like people in the area. I'd been researching cannabis. I was like, oh my God, it saved my kid's life. I wonder if there's anybody else. Thousands and thousands of people, even within the Bristol area, there were hundreds of people, and there was Bristol Cannabis Social Club. And so I started meeting up with people, and there was people saying to me, you need to meet this guy called Jeff. You need to meet Jeff Ditchfield. And I was like, well, where is he? And I was like, he's in Spain. It's like, okay, well, this is in Spain. And it just so happened that Russell Howard's parents actually said to us, hey, listen, we've got a villa in Spain. Do you want to go on holiday? Like, you need a holiday. And I was like, okay. So I asked the hospital, and they said to me, no, we're going to section him. We're going to sedate him. We're going to force feed him. We're going to treat him like an anorexic. And, you know, and I was like, well, you're not going to give him any mental health care because he doesn't qualify. So I said, listen, just let me take him to Spain. If after we come back, he's the same, I'll hand him over to you. Because they said he was on the brink of a heart attack. He weighed 24 kilos, that's nothing. It's about 5 stone or something like this. And I say that I've never seen anything like it other than on like documentaries of Auschwitz. I mean, I'm not lying. It was horrible. He was literally a bag of bones. And they agreed.
It's so hard to watch that as a mum.
That was the hardest 6 months of the whole thing, because the chemo was like, well, you got no choice anyway because your kid will be taken into care. This was Deryn. This was Deryn making the choices here. And it was so hard to like, but I got it. I understood, you know, there wasn't even a light at the end of the tunnel. There was nothing, you know, for him. So I could understand. And it was awful, actually. There was a few, he ended up, he was in the newspaper quite a lot, especially the local newspapers. And with this whole thing, he was definitely in the newspapers. And the amount of people that made comments saying what an ungrateful little shit he was, that like he'd been given a second chance at life and he didn't want it. I'm like, put yourself in his position just for a minute. Like if you can imagine at 14 years old, you know, getting your head around that kind of stuff and going through that for 4 years. And so we went to Spain and we met the guy, Jeff, and he gave us this 1 ml syringe of what we would class RSO, FICO, whatever you want to call it, full extract cannabis oil. So it's the really thick. The stuff that I made was just the heat extraction, the way that you would like, you know, put garlic in some olive oil. It was a similar kind of thing. This was the full extract cannabis oil. So this was a really, really, really potent stuff. And I had no qualms in giving him this. Like, this strange dude is giving it. I don't care, you know. And Deryn was okay with it. Deryn didn't want to die. He just didn't want to suffer anymore, you know. And so if this was a promise that he wouldn't suffer, then he was going to take it. And Jeff said to us, just put like a tiny little bit, like half a grain of rice or something, try and get it on his gum, just get him to eat it. And he says, this is the lemon haze strain. And he says, I really do feel this is going to help him. So we went back to the villa, and the next morning, lo and behold, I did put it in his mouth. And about 3/4 an hour later, I shouted down, I have 2 children, and shouted down to both my boys. I was like, I'm making some lunch. Who wants any? And I expected the usual grunt that I had back from Deryn. And he shouted up, make me loads, I'm starving. And I just was like, he comes up the stairs, his eyes as red as the devil's appendage.
Oh, from half a grain?
Half a grain. I mean, this is pretty potent stuff. We're talking probably 50 milligrams of THC at that point in that very small amount. That's a lot. Your average joint with no tobacco is kind of 30. So, yeah.
So you smoked a joint and a half?
Pretty much in one go, and just this oil and sublingual application. And when you ingest it, so there's a whole science behind it that I won't go into, but smoking and ingesting and oils is all very, very different. I don't recommend smoking it. I recommend oil. I work with the oil now, and I make tinctures out of it and stuff. So we can go low and slow. We don't have to like smash a person like we smashed Deryn, but Deryn was up for it. So yeah, he comes upstairs, red eyeballs, like grinning from ear to ear, like, and he just ate for 12 hours that day. He did not stop eating, and the next day, and the next day. And we would take him down to the, it's actually a picture in here when we were in Spain. We take him down to the restaurant, and he'd order like a ton of food.
And the waiter's probably thinking, what? No.
Yeah, because like, if you can see how skinny he is and like how sunken his eyes were and stuff, you know, like he was,
oh my goodness.
And they would look at him and they'd be like, are you sure? And I'd be like, yeah, trust me, he's gonna eat it. And he smashed all this food.
Oh my goodness.
2 weeks later, we go back to the hospital, and the oncologist took him to one side and said, they weighed him and measured him, and she comes to me and she's like, my God, he doesn't want to die anymore. I said, yeah, I know. She said, his mental health is improved like 300%. I said, yeah, I know. And she said, he's put on 4 kilos. I went, I know. She said, my God, that holiday did him the world of good. I said, yes, it was the holiday. We will leave it at that. It was it was the sun, sea and sangria. That's what it was. And ever since that day, June 2014, my son has been taking full extract cannabis oil, 150 milligrams of THC every single day, regardless, for the last 11 years. And I fully believe it's the only thing. Well, it's not the only thing, because we do lots of other different things. I work with lots of other healing modalities as well that I've learned across the year. You know, obviously diet, nutrition, very, very important. I bought him a Kangen machine so that he can have ionized water and flush the stuff out of him. They pumped him full of for, 4 years and try and, help heal him in that sense. And we do a fair amount of things, but he still lives. I don't want him to, he's not a monk. He doesn't have to be very restrictive. It's like mitigation, make sure that you're just aware. Awareness is the most important thing.
So is he walking around off his box?
No, no. So he actually, very interestingly, because his tolerance is so high now as well, he can absolutely, and he consumes cannabis like a trooper. If you cut him, he'd probably bleed green right now, but his tolerance is such that he's very well versed with it. But also,
but back then, when you were giving it to him, the trip back from Spain, was he like, what was it like? Hi guys, I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I just want to jump in here and remind you, please, could you like and subscribe? It helps us more than you'll ever know.
Oh, he was high as a kite. He was high as a kite most days. But you know what? And the funny thing is that most people that come to me now, they're like, I don't want to get high. And I go, why not? Oh, well, because what's wrong with being happy? Like, what's wrong with being high, elevated? What's wrong with that? Like, it's an amazing antidepressant. I only see what it's did with my kid, He was grinning from ear to ear every single day. What's wrong with that, And I think children respond really, really well to cannabis. Children respond far better than adults. And I think because adults have this preconceived
programming
thing. They have the programming, plus they have the they have, I think it's just literally the programming, whereas kids are like, I feel great. They don't have the paranoia, they don't get the pranging, because they don't have the fear of being arrested or caught or found out or anything. They don't have any of that fear, so they don't get the those side effects. So let me tell you about his hand. So 2 weeks after we come back from Spain and he's taking the oil every single day, one day he wakes up and says, Mum, my hand is killing me. And I was like, your hand can't hurt, dude. Like, you've had it 7 quarters. I was like, your hand can't hurt. He goes, Mum, I'm telling you, it's like electric shocks going down my fingers. My hand is killing me. So I thought this was phantom pains. And so I go to the Google gods again and I search. And it's actually THC is responsible for neurogenesis, regrowing of neural pathways. I will say within a year and a half, he got full range of movement back in his hand. And the only things he can't feel are his very fingertips. He can't pick up something with his thumb because they severed a tendon as well. So he has to kind of pick things up like this, but he's got his hand, right? He can use his hand. So, which makes me real happy because he rides a motorbike now. So he wouldn't be able to do that if he couldn't feel his hand. But he, neurogenesis. And over the last 11 years, I've actually seen people with half body paralysis from stroke get the use of their limbs back with persistent and consistent cannabis consumption. And so, yeah, from there on in, I was like, I was like, I need to write this down. God didn't give me this to sit on, for sure. There's a reason for this, but my child was still very young and still in recovery. It took him he's still in recovery now. It's the 11 years later. He's still recovering from not the cancer, not the cannabis, from what they did to him. They maimed him, the 30 rounds of radiation, all of that. But the cancer is nowhere to be seen. Touch wood. I really, truly believe. And my mum actually said to me few years ago, she's like, I don't understand why you're still giving him that weed. I don't understand. Like, it's done what it's done. I said, Mum, I'm not going to fuck around and find out. Like, that's not happening. I'm not stopping him having something that I know for a fact kills cancer cells. I am not going to stop giving him that to find out that, oh, it was the cannabis that was keeping those cancers away. Oh, darn it. I was like, he'll continue to take it. Plus, it's amazing for his autism. It's amazing for his ADHD.
So has there got to be a certain type of cannabis for certain types of cancers? Like, for anyone that's listening to this, because listen, it's 1 in 2 get cancer now. So
yeah.
So anyone that's listening to this, is there a certain thing that they should be looking for? Is it all over cannabis? And would you use it as a preventative? Do you personally use it for that reason, or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have an endocannabinoid system within our body, and that endocannabinoid system is responsible for homeostasis, which means balance on a cellular level. So the endocannabinoid system sits above every other system in your body, your lymphatic, respiratory, circulation, and digestive, whatever. It sits above all of those systems. And when it's fully functioning, it trickles down and creates balance across all of those things. So with people with high blood pressure, it brings it down. Low blood pressure, it takes it up. You're overweight, it'll help you lose weight. You're underweight, puts weight on. You know, it will help you find that equilibrium within your body. And so we are programmed and designed on a cellular level to consume cannabinoids. Cannabis just happens to be a plant that is abundant in cannabinoids. It's not the only one. We used to be able to get cannabinoids in a lot of food, but our food is so depleted now that nutritional value is virtually nothing, you know. So I think they say that you have to eat 47 apples to get the same nutritional value as one apple like 50 years ago or something. So yeah, so it's crazy. So we're not getting cannabinoids from where we would usually get them in our diet. So cannabis is an amazing plant to be able to, supplement that. It's just a great supplementary plant. And so absolutely, to keep the body balanced, absolutely, I recommend, don't break the law unless you have to. I do say that to people, unless it's cancer or MS or Parkinson's, you really don't have to go in with high amounts of THC. But even a really good CBD. I mean, I have my own CBD brand in the UK because I was sick of seeing shoddy CBD on the market. And I was like, you can't beat them, join them. It's called The Activist. You don't have any.
But is that going to work if someone is undergoing treatment?
So CBD in its alone is a really, so when people come to me, they're like, hey, I want to know what CBD is best for me. I'm like, well, what have you got going on? If they've got cancer and they say, I want to use CBD with it, I say, okay, well, listen, CBD is not going to be enough to actually kill the cancer cells. You need THC is vital for that. You have to have that. You have to break the law if you want to actually treat your cancer. However, CBD can be really powerful at helping with the side effects of conventional treatment. So it can be really helpful for, it's a powerful anti-inflammatory, anti-spasmodic, anti-seizure. It's really good for helping you get through conventional treatment if that's what you want to do. I always say to people, if you are going to do conventional treatment, which 95% of people that I talk to on a daily basis do have chemo, and there's no judgment for me from that. I understand why people do it. But if you are going to do that, for goodness sake, do everything that you can also do to mitigate that, because the chemo is, it's indiscriminate. It goes for every fast growing cell. So if you can change your water, change your food, really look at what goes in, on and around your body, and make sure that you're not feeding the disease while you're trying to treat it, you're going to give your body the best chance that you can give it, right? So I went to Madrid University a number of years ago because there's some professors out there who've been working with cannabis and cancers for about 20 years now. Dr. Cristina Sanchez, Professor Manuel Guzman, and Professor Guillermo Velasco. And I met them out in Madrid, and I saw, it was so crazy to go into a scientific lab in Spain where they've got big boards up talking about the endocannabinoid system and CB1 receptors and CB2 and how cannabis does it. And you're like, 1,000 miles away, this is illegal and has no medicinal benefit, and here we are studying this. So they discovered that THC kills cancer cells. They discovered the mechanism of action over in Madrid University. And while I was there, and I know the science behind it, I won't go into it. If anybody wants to know, they can come and ask me, and I will, and it's actually out there. But so while I was there, I said, hey, I've been working with cancer patients with cannabis for a few years now, and I'm seeing that those that do chemo and cannabis don't lose their hair, they don't lose weight, they don't lose their color in their face, they don't lose their appetite, they the star pupils. I said, is cannabis protecting the healthy cells from the harmful effects of the chemo? Because that's what I'm seeing. And he said, yes, absolutely it is. I said, I knew it. That's what I was seeing. Just to hear it from a doctor, I hear it from a professor who's like, yes, that's what happens. So I always say to people, I'm like, look, if you want to go down that road, and I do understand why you do, at least please do this along, because you can do it along. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You don't have to wait until that's finished to start this. You can do them both very well together. I do recommend not even bothering telling your doctor you're doing it, because there's nothing they can do. Even if they are in favor of it, there's nothing they can do to support you with it. They're not allowed to, because of the Cancer Act of 1939, they can't. But also a lot of them, they're getting their information trickled down from above, and we know that they lie. We know the Rockefeller, the whole medical system is built on a lie. And so very often I get people come to me who say, oh, my doctor said that CBD would actually contradict this and CBD would do that. And I said, no, that's not true. No, you know, and very often as well, you know, so cannabis won't come up on a blood test, on a routine blood test. I have worked with, I don't know how many hundreds of people in the last 11 years, and I will touch wood again, not one person has even been investigated. And I've worked with a lot of parents of a lot of children. And of course, the worry is, well, will it be detected in his blood? And I said, it's, you know, again, I can't guarantee, but in a routine blood test, it doesn't come up. They have to actually specifically look for it. And they'll only look for it if they have reasonable suspicion. So don't give them any reason to be suspicious, right? Don't mentioning CBD to them will put up a red flag to them.
Yeah.
So there's no point even mentioning. And I hate the way that it's like that, because I would much rather work with a doctor. I've had doctors refer people to me over the years. I've had nurses refer people to me, because there's a few doctors are like, I can't help you, but this woman can say things that I can't say, you know? So there are some.
And is there like a protocol that you tend to give?
Yeah, so I've actually written an ebook. I wrote it a good few years ago, and I give that away for free. And it's got protocols in there from things that I've learned from so Jeff Ditchfield. He mentored me for about 3 years, and I went everywhere with him, and I met hundreds of people over the course of that time. And I learned he'd been working with cancer and cannabis for like 20 years at that point. So I learned a lot from him, and a lot of my ethics and the way that I do things come from him and my time with him. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. He died a couple of years ago. But I learned a lot from him. And then I've also spoken to, you know, cannabis nurses in the US and doctors in the US who are allowed to work with it over here. So I've taken all of the information, and professors in Spain, and I've taken all of this information, and more so that real people, human studies, you know, the anecdotal evidence. I'd rather anecdotal than read a paper that's been paid for by someone and there's been manipulation. And so people, you know, over the last 11 years, I've seen what's worked and I've seen what hasn't. And so I wrote an ebook, and it has a lot of real basic information. I'm more than happy to give it to anybody who wants it. And there are certain protocols for certain cancers. So hormone-driven breast cancer, for example, or even HPV throat cancer, we have to treat that very carefully. You have to have more CBD than THC, and it's usually a 1 to 3, 1 to 4 ratio of THC to CBD. Going into the science of it's to do with receptors and things like this. But basically, I've had a lot of people come to me over the years as well and say, you know, I've been taking this RSO, this FICO, high THC, my hormone-driven breast cancer has just got worse. I don't understand what's going on. I'm like, well, how much CBD did you have with it? And they say, well, none. I go, there's your issue. There's your issue. You know, we need to make sure that ratio is correct. And so, but other than that, most cancers respond very, very well to high amounts of THC. But I would always recommend at least a 1-to-1 ratio, because CBD is like the antidote to the psychoactive effects of the THC. So the more CBD you can have, it actually it balances it out, you know. So God gave us the plant. Nature intended the plant to be very balanced. And actually, it started with 5 land races. And those 5 land races were around about 6 to 10% THC, 6 to 10% CBD. So balanced, you know, 1-to-1 effectively. And then, of course, we got hold of it and we've manipulated it. And now there's over 10,000 strains and they're all different. And most of them are very high in THC without the appropriate amount of CBD, because people are going for the high. If you're selling it and people want to get high, they don't want the antidote in there. You know, you don't want the thing that's going to balance it out. You want to get high. So this is where we're at right now, where there's just thousands and thousands of strains. And of course, most street weed is high THC without the appropriate amount of CBD. And so I always.
So what do you advise people to go and buy the cannabis, then you match it with the CBD? So I have people, I can signpost people, and I keep it in 2 separate bottles, mainly because with 2 separate bottles, you can be a lot more flexible. If you want to take extra CBD to help you with the psychoactive effects to get you up there, then you absolutely can. You know, if I put it all in one bottle, then you're kind of stuck with it in the one bottle. But if we have high THC here and high CBD here, we can have like 1 drop of each, 1-to-1, 1 drop, 3 drops. You know, we can be more flexible with it. Unless you've got hormone driven issue, then you have to be a lot more, you know, can't be as flexible. But it's really important that this is another thing, you know, I get in the eyes of the government, I guess I'd be a drug dealer. I'm not a drug dealer because I actually give a shit. I consult with people, I talk to people, I ask them about medications. There are contraindications with certain medications that could actually be fatal if we don't get that right, you know. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a just go over there and take half a grain of rice and just carry on with it. Like,
I don't work that way. I know there's a lot of people that do, and I'm sure they mean well. I personally don't work that way, because I ask questions. Well, what kind of cancer is it? What medications are you on? What's your life like? You know, what kind of lifestyle do you have? What do we need to do to make sure that we can get the most amount in you without completely destroying your quality of life?
And you spoke earlier about your food and your environment. How important are they on a journey with someone who's dealing with cancer? And if you were going to streamline what's in the ebook,
so
says that
it's really, really important that we mainly become aware of everything that goes in, on, and around your body is either feeding or fighting disease, right? And I see us all on this like sliding scale. Homeostasis on one side, disease on the other side, because homeobalance is just the opposite of dis-ease. And so we're on this sliding scale every day. So, oh, I have a slice of cake, I'm going towards disease. Well, then I'll take some cannabis and it'll push me back this way. Well, maybe I'll have a chocolate. That's okay. And then we'll go drink some Kangen water and go that way. So everything you're doing, just make sure you're mitigating and make sure you're always in the favor of balance. Don't push yourself to that point of disease. And so it's really obviously sugar. Oh my life, stop the pop, it's refined sugar. Our body does need sugar for our cells to replicate, but we don't need it in as much as we're going to get in a can of Coke. So yeah, sugar is the first one. Like, really get on top of the sugar intake and really be very aware of it. Eat fruit by all means, but don't, like, sugar has to go. And then we have to look at other things like processed foods. The more processed food, the more processes of food has gone through, the worse it is for your body to break down and try and get back to its natural state of nutrients. Like, don't give your body any more hard work than it needs, especially if you're trying to heal from something. Your body, all of your energy needs to go into healing. And if your body is going into expending energy and trying to get your processed food just to nutrients, like, you're not giving yourself the best chance that you can have. And you have to clean everything out. You have to stop what made you sick in the first place. You have to be willing to completely change everything. And that can be really hard for some people. That can be really hard for a lot of people. They don't want to, they've got their creature comforts. They like their life. They don't want to have to change things. And I'm like, well, then don't. But just understand that you're really not going to get the best out of this if you don't give it your all. You're going to get a watered down version of what you could get if you really put everything into it. But this is another thing I ask people when they come to me. I say, what do you want? Do you want to go into remission, or do you just want it to not hurt and just have a better quality of life? Because we can do both, and it's up to you. It's no judgment from me. It's not my life. It's not my journey. I'm willing to help you and support you in whatever you want to do. And so a number of people will say, do you know what? I'm 78, I'm 80, whatever, and I've had a good life, and I don't want to give up my cake. I don't want to give up my chocolate, my ice cream. They're the things that I love. And if you can just make it so that I can have a really good quality of life and it doesn't hurt, and then I'm good and I'm okay,
And what would be some of the most miraculous things you've seen with the power of cannabis, aside from your own son?
Aside from him, man, I've seen stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 3 months to live, go home and die, get your affairs in order. I've seen stage 4 liver, stage 4 over the last 11 years, probably stage 4, most of them. I tell you what is really difficult is brain tumors. Brain tumors seem to be really, they're the hardest. And I'm not saying that it's not doable, because it is. But that's the one that I've seen the least amount of. That seems to be the hardest one. Blood cancers really respond really, really well. But yeah, I've seen, and it's not just cancer I work with either. It's autism and ADHD and Tourette syndrome and fibromyalgia and MS and Parkinson's. And I've seen people literally in front of me with the shakes, and I've gone, do you want to have a drop? And they've gone, yeah. And I've literally given them a drop, and within moments, and they look at you like, because they haven't had that relief in their entire life. I actually got a message 2 days ago from somebody who said, oh my God, my daughter's been 3 days seizure free. That hasn't happened since 2018,
Sweet Jesus.
And so little things like that. And even one of the most profound ones, I guess, with autism. So my son's autistic, and he explained to me what THC does to him as an autistic person. And so when this lady came to me about 5 years ago, I would say, and she said, my little girl is 4, and they want to start medicating her. She is non-verbal. She smashes her head against the wall. She pulls her hair out. She won't eat. She won't keep her clothes on. She just wants to stand in the window naked all day. She's just absolutely locked into her own brain. It's really traumatic to watch her. And now she's getting to the age where they kind of want to go to school. So they're talking about medication. She's like, I don't want to medicate her. And she said she's adamant that it's vaccine damage. She said she was a perfectly well 18-month-old and she had the vaccine, and it overnight sent her back into a baby, this complete like vegetative state. And so I said, listen, I'm willing to help you. I said, but you, from what my son has told me, you're probably going to have to break the law. Are you okay with that? She's like, I don't care. I'll do anything. So I sent her off to my friend and I said, this is what I would recommend. Sent her to my friend. And we went with a 2-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD. And within, I think, 2 days, I had a video in my inbox of this little girl standing up in the bath, singing head, shoulders, knees and toes. Like an 18-month-old, her mum's words were, she's picked up where she left off. And I still get goosebumps now. She's no longer smashing her head. She eats. And 3 days after that, I had a little picture of her in a little school uniform with a little book bag. And this was 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago now.
And how is she now? Do you see in contact?
Still great. Any mum that comes to me with a kid with autism, I'm like, I actually send her off to this girl. She's more than happy. She's got her own little group of people now that she's collecting over the years that I'm, and she's advising these mums, and just because it can be scary, especially when you have small children, like you're entering into a realm of not just, well, this is a therapy that some strange woman is like recommended on the internet, but it's also not only that, you're not free to explore that without persecution and prosecution if you're found out, so that it's wrapped in this, and it's horrible, and it shouldn't be like that. These parents shouldn't have to be worrying about the legalities of things. Well, all they want to do is bring their children relief, and so that's a pretty profound, like, autistic story, which always sits with me. And I tell that story a lot because it was just,
and are you seeing a rise of sick children?
I'm seeing a rise of sick children. I'm seeing a rise of turbo cancers. I'm seeing a rise of people who were predominantly quite well and all of a sudden are not, and they're like really not well. It's coming out of seemingly nowhere. We know it's not coming out of nowhere. And there's more and more sick children now. But do you know what the wonderful thing is as well, is that there's more and more people now who are coming to me right at the beginning of their diagnosis rather than right at the end. And so, years ago it was, I've been given 3 weeks to live or 3 months or whatever. Now it's, I've just been diagnosed. What can I do? And I'm like,
yeah,
because the sooner that you can not just apply cannabis to your life, but the sooner you can have that awareness to get rid of the shit that's made you sick in the first place, the sooner that you can change your life around, the better. The sooner that you can support your bodies and its innate ability to heal itself. We are healing machines. We are programmed on a cellular level to survive. Nothing is against us. Autoimmune diseases aren't trying to kill us. Cancer's not trying to kill us. That's the one that a lot of people don't like to hear me say. Cancer's not trying to kill you. It's a friend that's knocked on the door and said, hey, things are going like wrong. You need to like really get a grip of things. We have time because you're still alive. We really need to look at things. Things need to change. And of course, most people go, you, and they slam the door in its face and they don't want to hear the message that it's bringing. The message that it's bringing is your body's out of balance and we need to do something drastic right now, so the sooner that you can do that, and of course prevention is far better than any cure that we're looking for. If you can not even get sick in the first place, then you're going to be doing a lot better, because I saw a thing not long ago, the longer you stay on the wrong train, the more expensive it is for you to get home. So the sooner that you can do things for yourself, like the better that you're going to do.
So what about someone like me? Would you advise someone like me to be taking like a low dose of CBD or cannabis? Like who's like young Absolutely. And healthy, and for what exact reasons?
So the average starting dose for an adult for general well-being is around about 24 milligrams a day of CBD. And that's just to keep your endocannabinoid system going so that every system in your body can have balance, so that you can feel the best that you can feel. If you were breastfed as a baby, that was probably the last time that you had cannabinoids. So as a woman, we produce breast milk. And when we feed our babies, we actually produce cannabinoids and we feed them to our babies. So when a baby is milk drunk, it's not milk drunk, it's stoned. Wow. And so the reason why breastfed babies are always hungry is because they've got the munchies. And the reason why their immune system is better, one of them, is because they have these cannabinoids that we feed them. And so we're designed to be receiving cannabinoids. So as we go through and our diet is so depleted and our food is depleted, supplement with cannabinoids. Absolutely. You will feel so much better for it. So 24 milligrams a day. My 3,000 milligram CBD tincture is 12 milligrams per one tiny drop. I made mine as potent as I could possibly make it in the legal market. So that's literally 2 drops a day.
You're not going to feel anything?
No, there's no THC. I've actually created my CBD. I wanted to put a small trace of THC in there, but because of legalities and because there was this novel food act thing going on at the time, and because I couldn't afford to spend 10 grand getting my CBD brand going to have it pulled off the shelves weeks later. I couldn't afford to do that. So, and because I do help people with THC, I don't feel bad. I'm like, well,
so would you then advise me to take THC as well as like a preventative?
I would advise you to take my CBD. I would love you to take my CBD, and I would love you to just like tell me what you think about it too. And I would if you had things going on, I would say a small dose of THC. But again, don't break the law unless you have to. Most people will find when you've got moderate pain, you've got moderate things going on, they will find that CBD actually goes a really long way to help them. They don't need the added stress of breaking the law on top of that. My CBD brand as well, I was the first one to create. I added terpenes, which terpenes are, so a lemon has limonene, that's the smell of the lemon. But the terpenes within cannabis plants, which there are many, they all have medicinal benefits as well. So I created three different blends of CBD. I have the purple punch, which is for sleep, rest, relaxation, anxiety, things like that. It's a calmative. And then I have on the other end of the spectrum, I have the lemon haze, which is obviously in homage to my son. And it's the terpenes that come from the same strain that we gave him in Spain. So it's uplifting. It's great for appetite. It's great for depression. It's great for getting you up and getting you going in the day. So I have that one, and I have the nighttime one, and I have just the natural one, normal one in the morning, in the middle. So I've done what I can do to bring the best medicinal blend to people within the realms of the legal market as much as I can. So if you do have extra things going on, then I would rather recommend the purple punch or the lemon haze. But yeah, I would recommend everybody be on it. I wish everybody would. I mean, I do every day, and everybody in my life, like, I take some CBD, have some, and I bar it with people. I try and help as many people as I can with it.
And let's bring it back to the whole pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
What was the moment when you thought like this is really corrupt? And obviously, I think things are shifting now because you and I are having conversations like these. And how are you feeling that shift over there, and where do you think that leaves the pharmaceutical landscape?
So, again, kind of going back to years ago, it was people coming to me right at the end of their journeys, and now people are coming right at the beginning. So things are changing. There's a lot more information out there. The tides are changing for sure, definitely. And which again is why we're seeing the ramp up of medical cannabis, and we're seeing the ramp up of all the clinics in the UK, because they want to monopolize. They're trying to monopolize. They know that people are going to go get it, so they want it to come from them. It's like, not anybody else's weed, our weed. Don't grow your own. And so really, yeah, I think for me, the moment with the light bulb moment, was the biggest, like, corruption of sugar and the food industry, and how the food industry is in bed with the pharmaceutical industry, because one makes you sick and then the other one gives you a pill for an ill. And then of course you end up going in with the bad back, and then 2 years later you're on heart medication and diabetes medication. It's just an endless slippery slope. And then I think, when he didn't die because I gave him cannabis, I was like, this plant, I was a bouncer, for goodness sake, where I used to take it off people, and I'd give it to the police, and I'd grass them up to the police, and I'm there going, this plant we have been told that this plant is dangerous, psychosis, all of these different things. And here it is, everything else that the pharmaceutical industry could throw at him, every tool they had in their box didn't work. And this one plant saved his life and has helped him in recovery for the last 11 years as well. When he was 15, he had the cellular age of an 85-year-old. Now at 25, he has the cellular age of a 75-year-old. So we're reversing things. Things are getting better, and it shouldn't be in their mind. They shouldn't be seeing these results. And so I think there's, through stories like mine, and of course, when I went on TV and told the world what I did in front of everybody on This Morning, I left that studio like this, thinking I was going to be arrested. I absolutely was like, okay, I've done it now, come and get me. And nothing. And touch wood, still nothing. And so, yeah, protests and the more it comes into the mainstream, the more people are going to look. That's the thing with the mainstream, is again, it's like with COVID. I know what they were trying to do, but what they actually did was they caused a huge divide. And we saw a lot of people then start questioning because they're like, this don't make sense. And it's the same with the cannabis. You know, people are looking and going, this don't make sense. So they start looking for themselves, and everybody knows somebody now who's had help with cannabis. And I think for me as well, when I went on this morning, I didn't want to preach to the converted. I didn't want to speak to cannabis people. They already knew how amazing it was. I needed to change the views of the everyday person, the grey army, the mums at home with their kids. I wanted to change the minds of the people who had this preconceived idea that cannabis was dangerous and shouldn't be gone anywhere near. I wanted to change those minds. And I think I did a really good job of it. I really do. And I'm incredibly proud of myself for being brave enough. And I think that's something else that I want to commend you on, is that I love the fact that you will have people on your podcast that maybe you don't agree with, and that's okay, but you give them a voice and a platform, because without these conversations, things can't change. And without conversations, things then get hidden. And, you know, I know, and
for me, it's always really important, like, you know, as we're going to get to it, but the show's called Getting There. I think we're all chasing this island, this illusion, this destination that we think is going to bring us like the ultimate success. And it's not until we understand what's happened to people that creates their driving forces. So you're not just a crazy woman that, you know, that grew up barefoot and just grew up at 6 years old, like lighting a joint of cannabis, like you lost your son. Do you know what I mean? And we live in a society where we've been so programmed to quickly judge the people and put them in a box. So for me, it's always important to understand someone's driving forces. Like you say, whether you agree with them or not, but without conversations like these, like you say, change doesn't happen. But one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, because strangely enough, it came up in a conversation last week as we're talking about the whole corruption, is that your children are not your children. And I know you told me a story about how people in your community actually had their children taken off them and died in foster care because of the use of cannabis. Could you just, I'd love to share this story so people can really wake up to what's happening.
Absolutely. So yeah, it was when I was helping Jeff, or when I was working with Jeff. And so it wasn't a family that I had helped, but it was a family that Jeff had helped. And I never forget, this story they were telling us over the phone, so I could hear the story. I didn't meet the family, I didn't know him, but I heard the story over the phone. And the dad was just like beside himself, and I followed this whole story. And what had happened was Jeff had been helping very practically this young girl. She had leukemia and she was dying. She was like, they'd put her on hospice care, very similar situation. And they stepped in and they helped, and she started to get better. Well, one of the nurses took it upon herself to grass him up to the authorities, told the police on him. And so, of course, the police come in and they find cannabis in the home, and they find, the oil and things like this. And of course, they take the child and they put the child into foster care. And of course, then went down a whole journey of, this dad's now fighting back and having to go to court. Well, they have secret family courts in the UK. I don't know if I've had some people tell me over the last few weeks that they don't exist anymore, but I wouldn't say they don't exist. They probably just changed tack, because let's be honest, they just get better at hiding things. And so he ends up in the secret family court, and he stands there, and the judge, calls him all these despicable names, says he's the worst dad in the world, like, you've given your child an illegal drug, blah, 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 blah. The child is now up for adoption. You will never see your child again. That's it. It's done, And the dad, obviously beside himself, was like, well, this is a death sentence for my child, because obviously while she's in foster care, she's not getting the one thing that's helped her. That's for sure. And so he says to the judge, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to go out into the world, and I'm going to tell him what you've done. I'm going to get to the media. I'm going to blow this up. You can't do this. Like, my kid's going to die. And the judge turned around and said to him, well, Mr. Smith, I will remind you that you currently have 2 children who are not in the system. And if you wish it to stay that way, you will say nothing. And so, of course, he threatened him with his other 2 children. And so the dad said nothing. The child subsequently did die. And the rest is history for that family. That's something they're going to have to live with for the rest of their lives. I can't even imagine the trauma and the anger and just it's just awful, and he's not alone. He's not alone.
And what are your options in the UK? Like, if your child was to get sick and you didn't want to give them traditional treatment, is there like actual laws where you have to give them chemo and radio?
I mean, if the doctors say that's what's in their best interest and you go against those doctors, then your child will be made award of the court for the safety of your child. It's this for your child's own good, because clearly you're a crazy parent. Because what parent wouldn't want their child to have cancer treatment, right? You know, and anything out of the system, outside of that system. And I remember, I don't know if you remember a story of a little boy called Neo many years ago. This is when I think before my son got sick, actually. And this little boy called Neo had a brain tumor, and and the mum was like, wanted histology reports, wanted it to be clarified that this was a brain tumor, and they wanted to immediately start radiation, like immediately wanted to fry his brain. And the mum was like, no, and she ran off with him. Now, I only know this story because a guy that I met through my journey told me this story. He's like, do you remember that kid called Neo? I was like, yeah. She goes, she was here. And I was like, oh. He goes, yeah, I had helicopters, I had police helicopters above my house and everything. They found him here. And so what had happened, and I remember it being on This Morning, dad and mum were estranged. They couldn't like, you know, couldn't get on the same page. So dad went to the media, was on This Morning. And the public outrage was like, what kind of mother wouldn't give their kid radiotherapy? Like, this child's got a brain tumor, like disgusting mother, like all these things. And it turns around, the guy told me that it turned out, they didn't put this on the TV, but they gave him radiation because they caught him, and they gave him radiotherapy. They fried his brain. They brain damaged him. And then histology came back and they said it was a pork worm. It wasn't even a brain tumor. It was a pork worm. And so mum was right to go, no, let's just wait and see. And of course, now medical matrix straight in there. And yeah, they've given him brain damage of a pork worm. And, you know, he said, well, you won't see that on the TV. They're not going to come on the TV and go, actually, not a bad mum. No, of course, they're going to let that narrative carry on, you know. So your choices at the moment are, which is why I'm so adamant. I'm so like, keep your kids healthy. Don't let them fall into that. Don't find out the hard way like I had to, that your kid's not yours. Like, don't be emotionally blackmailed like that. Do everything that you absolutely can right now to keep your kids as healthy as possible. Get those earpods out of their ears, like get them out of the way of the iPad, get them be eating good food, get them out in sunshine, for goodness sake, like get them out. And
so I guess that leads me to knowing what you know now. Take it back. What would you have done differently? Knowing what you know about the medical matrix,
everything
that you know, how would you, if you could go back and have your time again, how would you behave?
It's a tough one because I'm asked that a lot, you know, and it's a tough one because I do get contacted by a lot of parents who are in that position and do know. And so it's like, what can they do? Well, what are your options? Like, run away to Spain? Like, what are your options? It's hard. And so my thing is like, I would love to go further back to the point where he didn't get sick in the first place. That would be my favorite place to go. If I could go back, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have gotten vaccinated as a baby. I wouldn't have had all the drugs I had while I was pregnant with him, while I was going through labor. I wouldn't have ate the food that I ate. I mean, a lot of, you know, I get the kind of question of, what about babies with cancer? And I say, well, you know, if you take rotten eggs and sour milk, you're not going to bake a great cake, right? So take care of yourself, make sure you're in the best position you can health-wise before you have that baby, so that you can make the best baby that you can make, so it can be the healthiest. So I would go so far back as to like not even do any of that stuff. But if I had to go back to that one fateful day where I was already told he had cancer, God, it would be a hard one, because I would like to say that, well, I would skip the country, but that in itself, like, I don't know, it would be hard. I think I would have found it really hard not to murder somebody, knowing what they're doing to my kid. But if I did, then I would at least do everything that I possibly could. Like, I would get him on Kangen water immediately. I would give him cannabis immediately alongside. I would change his diet immediately. Like, everything that I know now, I would put into practice, so that if I was in a position where he had to have the chemo, at least I was mitigating it as much as I physically, humanly possibly could. You know, there's a saying that I used a lot when I did find out about stuff, and I was having to watch him go through the bone marrow, because I knew by the time of the bone marrow transplant, and it would be, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that kind of kept me sane through a lot of things, where it was like, well, can't stop him with the poison over here, but I can at least food, water, you know, herbs and other things that I can at least try and mitigate as much as I possibly can, you know.
And do you think these doctors know what they're doing, or you think they're just doing their job and what they've been programmed to do?
I think most of them are just following orders. And we know where that gets you, just following orders. I think now more and more are more awake and more aware. And I think it must be really hard for them as well when they do discover what they've been. I mean, I had a few nurses towards the end of our journey in hospital who actually came in and said, I'm quitting. And said, it's been really lovely to meet you. And I'm so glad I've met you, but you won't see me anymore. I'm quitting. And I was like, why? And they said, because I can't come in and poison children anymore. Can't do it anymore.
Yeah,
because
one of the homeopaths I work with was working at a hospital with dying children, and she said she couldn't see the trauma and the pain that they were going through, and she left. And she said that only 3 to 4% of the children come out of there.
Yeah.
So she said, I was watching the trauma in their last days, and that is what she couldn't live with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people who do, especially when they come across people like me, that it makes them question everything that they're doing. And I understand it. And again, they're in that profession because they love and they care and they want to help. And they really believe that is, I mean, that's the systems, if you want to teach the education system, that's where you go, right? If you want to defend your country because you're a man that wants to defend, well, you join the army, right? That's what you do. And the police, or, and religion, you want a connection with God, you go to church. Like, all of these little systems are put in front of us as, oh, you want this? You go in that box. You go in that box. And of course, nurses and doctors, they just want to care and they want to love. And that's the system that's set up for them. So they go in it with the best intentions. And a lot of them start seeing, I can't do what I want to do here. This is not set up to care in the way that I want to care for people. But of course, now they're in the system and they try and make it as good as they can while they're in there. But it's so you're just a tiny cog. You're just a tiny cog. And so my whole thing is that my mission on this earth is, the medical matrix, the system tried to murder my kid for money. They made about 3.2 million quid out of him, right? So for money, they tried to kill him. And so
how much did they make?
About 3.2 million, his entire treatment cost. 3.2 million, the taxpayer,
Stop it.
And so that's the thing, in the UK, people go, well, I don't pay for my healthcare. Yes, you do. Absolutely you do. And it's extortionate. I know that, for example, he was on a drug called tranexamic acid. And that is sold to the NHS.
Sounds fun.
Sounds fun. It stops you bleeding out from every orifice. And he went through bottles and bottles of that. And that's 500 quid per bottle to the NHS trust. It costs about £1 to make. So, and this is the same thing. This is how cannabis was not legalized in 2018. I see a lot of people go, oh, since cannabis was legalized, no, it's been legal in the UK for probably about 25 years right now on prescription. It's a drug called Sativex. GW Pharmaceuticals had a monopoly on cannabis. They were given a completely immoral license by the Blair administration many, many years ago. So they grow 220, it's probably more than this now, but they were growing 220 tons of White Widow every single year. And the UK is the biggest exporters of cannabis in the world, right? Mm. So GW Pharmaceuticals, they took out THC and they took out the CBD, they isolated the compounds and they put them in an alcohol extraction and they put it in an alcohol spray called Sativex. What they did many, many years ago was they tried it on MS patients. So there's about 2,000 MS patients that they trialed it on. The NHS trusts were charged something like 50 quid a bottle. So NHS trusts are like, yeah, we can afford 50 quid a bottle for a person on prescription, not a problem. So all of these MS patients were using Sativex. It worked amazingly well. Like it was incredible for MS. And then GW Pharmaceuticals went, nice, 500 quid a bottle now. So the NHS trust went, well, we can't afford 500 quid a bottle for people, So all these MS patients now are like, well, so they were told, we'll go private. Also, I can't afford to go private.
So what side effects? That just made me think though. So what help can this be for dementia and Parkinson's and those kind of diseases?
So THC is a neuroprotectant. So the lies of it's going to frazzle your brain cells, it protects your brain cells. It's neuroprotectant. Plus it can cross the blood-brain barrier, so it can be really helpful. We have a lot of CB receptors in our brain as well. They're like a lock and key system. The cannabis is the key, and these are all locks all over our body, and it can go in and do amazing things. So for things like Parkinson's, CBD can go a really long way for Parkinson's, but it's THC that's the proper tremor stopper. MS, again, fantastic results from it. Again, it has Alzheimer's. I've seen people with dementia, like non-verbal, like little autistic children, but they're at the other end of the spectrum. I've seen them become verbal again. It regrows neural pathways in the brain. So, you know, it's going to recreate, it's going to help, again, half body paralysis. I've seen people with the use of their limbs come back. So to me, because it works with the endocannabinoid system, and because the endocannabinoid system sits above every other system, it works for pretty much everything. Now, to the degree that it works is that they're going to depend on lots of variables, like, well, what are you eating? What are you drinking? What's your lifestyle like? You know, because if you try and put cannabis in with one hand while poisoning yourself with the other hand, you might maintain your current situation at best. You know, cannabis is just a tool. It's not a fix-all. It's not a cure-all. It's a tool that you need in your toolbox to go with all your other tools so that you can actually give your body what it needs. So, yeah, it's pretty profound and miraculous.
And how important has your faith been to you on this journey?
Oh, man, I think it's been everything since it was shook on that day. And it was proven to me that knowing all that whole time along was I could like rest on it. Ever since then, I have faith, and I have, it's an interesting, I'm not religious, right? Mm-hmm. I've never read the Bible. I don't go to church. I'm not religious, but I am deeply spiritual, and I have a very deep connection with God as I see God. I don't see God as a man in a beard in the clouds. I see God as the male masculine energy of the world, and I see Mother Nature as the feminine. And I think with the both, that's how we have creation, because you can't have one without the other. And so the male energy of the father, of like, almost like, you know, the words telling you what to do, that's your conscience. You know when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, because you hear the voice going, yes, oh, really shouldn't do that. And you do it anyway, and your life goes to shit. It's because you're not doing as you're told, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I'm told to do something, I do it. Without question, I just do it. Like, where I've ended up right now is because a series of being told, do this, follow that person, go over there, open that door, don't go that way, go that way. Like these tiny little, I'm micromanaged. I'm literally, we're all micromanaged by God if we just listen and get our egos out of the way.
And I find the more that you listen, the louder that you hear.
Yes.
And the more that I take action on the small things, that I'm just like, okay, I'll just do that then. Like, it was so funny. We were talking in the studio about something, and then James had an idea. I was like, that's so weird. Someone wrote on one of my posts or something, I should do that. I was like, I should do this thing now. And everyone's like, oh, okay. You know, normally we take ages to like gather this evidence why we should do something. I'm like, I'm just going to try that and see where it goes. Because we also have this expectation, like if we do something, it's got to end up somewhere. And it's just like, oh, just do the thing, because you never know what it might teach you along the way.
Oh, every person I meet now, even I just done an event at the weekend where I headlined with Joel Salatin. I don't know if anybody know who he is, but he's the guy that was going to be the like head of agriculture in the White House and stuff. And so I was just at this event, and every single person I met, I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm going, I wonder where this is going to go. I wonder what this is like, because every door shut, you know, I have all these mantras like, you know, nothing meant for you will pass you by. So if a door shuts in your face, it's not meant to be for you. Move on. Don't go chasing stuff that's not meant for you. Like, life should be easy. Like, things are easy when you just stop fighting against the thing. I think we can both safely say that we're both very blessed that we probably didn't get what we want many times in our life, you know? Yeah. And so be guided and just be driven. And when people ask me, well, how did you end up where you're at, and 20 acres in the middle of the Midwest with, like, you know, and I go, because I floated in the breeze. I just let God take me. And when I made that promise and I made that deal with him, I meant it. And that's why I work in the way that I do. And I feel that the more I do that and I keep to my side of the deal, I'm looked after. I'm always provided for. You know, I was asked a question at the weekend. Oh, well, you know, you live off grid and you've got this and you do this. Well, how much of your income is you, and how much is, you know, you work for somebody else? And I said, all of it is me. Am I rich? No. Well, I am rich. Very rich in my life. You know, I might not have a lot of money in the bank, but I'm always provided for. I never go without. And I have this absolute unwavering faith that no matter what I do in my life, I will always be provided for in whichever way I need to be provided for. And it's working out so far, you know, so 11 years down the line, it's like, I'm still going. So
I guess that leads me to my final question. We spoke about this, you know, island that we're all chasing, this illusion, this destination. Mm-hmm. Where is your there? Where are you trying to get to?
I have no idea. And, you know, and I think the best thing is that if I was to put an idea on that, it would have limitations. So I just give it to God, because God will give you things that you can't even imagine. So just leave it open. And it's not about, you know, for me, it's like, I don't care about seeing the full staircase. I just need to see the step. That's all I need. I don't need to see all of that, because that's overwhelming. And then the ego starts coming in, and we start trying to manipulate things and move things. And we don't, you know, so I very much am like, I give it to God. I get up every day. I make my side of the deal. I do what I can. I enjoy my life as much as I possibly can. I love my life as much as I can. I have my hard times. Of course I do. There's ebbs and flows. That's life. But I know if you'd asked me that like 15, 20 years ago, I'd have said, oh, big house, cars, motorbikes. Like, I was very materialistic. And now I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want to put those kind of limitations on that. I just want to give it to God, and let's see where it takes me.
Beautiful. And if someone's looking to find you, they're like listening to this because the likelihood they might know somebody who's got cancer or is going through something, where's the best place for people to find you, Callie?
Instagram, for sure.
And your handle is, we're going to put it in the notes as well.
It's at hope_dealer254. I have a link tree as well. If you just go to Linktree and like Linktree/ Callie Blackwell, or, you know, I'm on Facebook. It's not hard to find me. It really isn't. I'm kind of all over the place.
So thank you so much for coming on.
You are,
and I will see you very soon.
Yes, I'm so excited.